Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video on the channel, guys. So what I have for you guys today is going to be my week 2 championship score predictions. So before we get into anything in this video here today, I must say a massive thank you to you guys for your response on week 1 score predictions. That video absolutely blew up and the support on it was just absolutely insane. So thank you so much for that. And as well as that, thank you so much for 6,000 subscribers. Literally, it was only like the other week that I was saying thank you for 5,000, and now we've only gone and hit 6,000. So the growth on the channel recently has just been ridiculous. So honestly, thank you so much for all the support on the videos recently. But we are of course here today to do some score predictions. So if you've not seen this series before, let me quickly explain what it's all about. So every week I give you my championship score predictions for what I think the results will be with each game going on in the championship. FIFA 17 also makes their score predictions, but what I'm really interested to know is what you guys have to say. So in the description down below, I'll leave all the fixtures that are taking place this weekend in the championship, and then you guys can easily go ahead and make your score predictions. And then if you do successfully manage to get any of your predictions correct, I will include your comment at the start of the next video. So of course, since we did our last prediction video, we've already had some cup action going on in midweek. We've actually got a cup game tonight as well going on, which is a bit funny, very close to the next round of championship games. But in my opinion, I don't think you can read too much into cup games. I mean, myself being a Preston fan, we lost 3-2 to Accrington, so I'm hoping you can't read too much into cup games. But enough of that, let's get into some championship action. So our first game to talk over is Barnsley, who are coming up against Ipswich. So two sides coming up against each other who have already had quite contrasting starts to the season. Of course, Barnsley losing their first match and Ipswich going ahead and winning their first match. So it's going to be quite pivotal actually that Barnsley go ahead and get the ball rolling and hopefully for them get some points in this game. Ipswich won't make it easy for them. You know, Joe Garner's already been able to hit the ground running and get a goal on his debut. Added to that, Ipswich have now got Martin Waghorn going forward now, so they'll be looking to touch up their options going forward. Barnsley, I feel like, really do need a response from that display they had last time out against Bristol City. I know a lot of Barnsley fans weren't happy with that game, and I'm going to fancy them to get something from this one, you know. Ipswich last season were a very inconsistent side, so I think some of that could peter into this season as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say this one will end as a 1-1 draw. FIFA saying it will also end 1-1. Our next game to talk over is then taking place between Birmingham and Bristol City, and similar to the last game actually, these two sides having contrasting starts to the season. Bristol City of course already having 3 points on the board after that victory against Barnsley, whereas Birmingham got off to a pretty bad start really, losing to Ipswich. And I think it's pretty fair to say that Birmingham, when I'm looking at these two squads, I do get the impression that Bristol City do have the more complete squad at this point in time. Birmingham I feel like need more than what Bristol City do coming to the end of the transfer window now. So for having a more settled squad and for starting the season a bit better, having a bit of momentum behind them, Bristol City are probably in a better position going into this game in my opinion. Of course, one interesting thing going into this game actually is Aidan Flint. Will he play in this game? Of course, throughout the whole of the transfer window, he's been heavily linked with a move to Birmingham. So what Bristol City's lineup is for this one will be very interesting to see indeed. But in terms of how the game I think could go, I'm actually going to go ahead and back another Bristol City victory. I think they'll start this season very strongly, and I'll back them to get a 2-0 away victory in this one, whereas FIFA saying it'll be 2-1 Birmingham. Going into our next fixture we have Brentford, who are coming up against Nottingham Forest. So in Brentford's first adventure out in the championship, they didn't have the best start really. They're of course starting out in a losing fashion, losing to Sheffield United. In that game they were a little bit unlucky. They did create a lot of chances in this game that they just couldn't really seem to take them. So playing at home, I think their home form will be quite good this year actually, and coming up against Nottingham Forest, who I think it's fair to say got quite lucky last week of course with that 1-0 victory over Millwall. How they didn't concede in that game, I do not know. So with this one, I feel like there could be a few goals scored in this one actually. If Brentford do manage to touch up on their final product, then I think they could get a couple of goals in this one. Forest, I'm not really sure. I think this could actually be a good game, you know, because both Brentford and Forest are capable of playing some very attractive football. So this could definitely be a game to keep your eye on this weekend, and I'm going to back it to be a 2-2 draw. FIFA saying it'll be 0-0. Coming up with our next game, we then have Cardiff City, who are coming up against Aston Villa. So Aston Villa last season were really quite a funny side. I mean, Aston Villa's home form last season was pretty much the opposite of their away form, so it's going to be interesting to see if they actually carry that into this season and have a poor away record once again. They're coming up against Cardiff, who I don't think that'll be an easy test for them at all. Cardiff have already shown this season what they can do. Kenneth Zohore already getting off the mark this season with his first goal against Burton. However, in terms of Cardiff, this will be a completely different game to the Burton away match. In that Burton game, they didn't even face a shot. You know, Burton didn't have one shot on target in that game, so I feel like this will be the opposite for that. Aston Villa have got a lot of firepower going forward, so Cardiff are going to have to be very wary when they're going forward, not to get hit on the counter-attack or anything like that. But in terms of what I think the result will be for this one, I'm going to back it to be a 1-1 draw. I think these two sides early on in the season could actually cancel each other out, so I'll say 1-1. FIFA saying 1-0 Cardiff. Our next game then features two teams which I think a lot of people are anticipating to be in the upper end of the table this season. That is, of course, Derby, who are coming up against Wolves. Now, once again, this is quite a pattern of who's got the most completed squad at this point in time, of course. Derby kicking their season off last week against Sunderland, the game on Sky on Friday night. What did I think of Derby in that game? I was a little bit disappointed with them, I'm not going to lie about that. I thought that going forward, it's clear to see that Derby still need more players going forward, especially out wide to maybe supplement their players in the middle, like Chris Martin and David Nugent especially. They're coming up against Wolves, who of course got off to their dream start to the season, managing to beat Middlesbrough by 1-0. I feel like this one could have a little bit of a different dynamic about it. Derby defensively, I think, will be a bit of a force this season. It's just going forward they need to touch up. Scott Carlson I rate as a keeper, and the whole back four I think is very stable. So for this game, I'm going to go ahead and back it to be a 1-1 draw, whereas FIFA's saying it'll be 2-0 Wolves. Coming into our next game, we then have Hull City, one of the recently relegated sides coming into the Championship. They are coming up against Burton Albion, and of course I've already mentioned Burton in this video so far. Their first game of the season against Cardiff City, they didn't manage to get a shot on target, so that's of course going to need to change. So is it going to happen in this game against Hull though? I feel like this could be quite a tricky one for Burton, especially considering last season as well, Burton didn't really have the best of times when they were playing away from home. It really was their home record which kept them above the dotted line. Hull City, I feel like, will be looking to have a bit of an improvement against the game they had against Aston Villa. I felt like they got a little bit lucky in that match, and maybe I will look to attack a lot more in this game. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of what Hull have got going forward. So in terms of a score for this one, I'm going to back a 2-0 home victory for Hull. I just feel like they'll have a bit too much for Burton in this one. Our next game to talk over is Leeds United coming up against my club, Preston North End. Now, of course, Preston got off to a very promising start to this season, as we did manage to beat Sheffield Wednesday by 1-0, and then we got beat 3-2 by Accrington Stanley in midweek. But we won't talk about that. We made a lot of changes for that game, okay? We're coming up against Leeds United, and I mean, Preston's record in recent years, probably the last like 3 years or so, we've really not got the greatest of records coming up against Leeds. So I anticipate this one to be a very difficult fixture, especially as well as our back four did do against Sheffield Wednesday. I still think we've got pretty massive gaps that need to be plugged in the transfer market, and with players going forward with Leeds like Pablo Hernandez and Chris Wood and Kemar Roof as well, I feel like we could be exposed a little bit at the back. Honestly, going away to Leeds as a Preston fan, I would take a point right here, right now, but I just feel like Leeds may edge it. They did look quite good against Bolton, and going forward, set piece I think will be very vulnerable from, but I think we will get a goal, but I think Leeds may just edge it. So I'm going to go with a 2-1 home victory for Leeds in this one, whereas FIFA saying it'll be 2-0 Leeds. Our next game actually features two of the recently promoted clubs, that being Millwall and Bolton. Now, of course, both these two sides not getting off to the best start to the season, as they both did lose their opening fixture, but with these two sides coming up against each other so early on in the season, this is a massive opportunity for one of them to go ahead and put a stamp down and claim all the 3 points. Now, I mean, that game Millwall had against Nottingham Forest, going forward, they just look like such a direct side, and considering how Bolton struggled with how direct Leeds were at times, if you're putting them up against a side like Millwall, who will be even more direct, I feel like Millwall may actually edge this one, and I could actually see quite a few goals being scored in this one. So I'm actually going to go with a 3-1 home victory for Millwall. I just feel like going forward and defensively, I feel like Millwall will make the Den a bit of a fortress this season, to be honest. So I'm going to go with a 3-1 home victory for Millwall, whereas FIFA same, it'll be 1-0 Millwall. Our next encounter is actually a very interesting one, to say the least. We have two of the sides who were actually in the playoff semi-final together last season. So we've got a rematch between Reading and Fulham. Now, of course, last season, Reading managed to take full advantage as they went on to advance to the playoff final instead of Fulham. In terms of how I think this game will go, this is a really hard one to call in my opinion, because whenever Reading seemed to get beat last season, there weren't actually too many instances where they went ahead and went on back-to-back losers. You know, they did seem to bounce back whenever they had a poor result previously, but they're coming up against a Fulham side who, on the opening day of the season, I was quite impressed by. Going forward, I think they'll cause Reading a lot of problems in this game, especially if they can sharpen up on a bit more of their final product. Fulham could cause Reading some problems in this one, so I'm going to go with a 3-1 away victory for Fulham in this one, whereas FIFA same, it'll be 1-0 Reading. Then for our next fixture we go, we have Sheffield Wednesday, who are coming up against Queen's Park Rangers. Now, Sheffield Wednesday, of course, definitely not getting off to the best start to the season, and QPR actually managing to surprise a lot of people with a very good performance against Reading. This will be a different game though, in my opinion. Of course, Sheffield Wednesday managing to bounce back in midweek with, I think, a 4-1 cup victory on Tuesday night. So, will Sheffield Wednesday have got a bit of their swagger back, and will have they learned from a few of their mistakes at Preston? It's early days to go ahead and tell, but I'm going to go ahead and back them to bounce back in this one. As good as I thought QPR were against Reading, Sheffield Wednesday are a completely different side, and they're going to want to be bouncing back, of course, and they're definitely not a team to underestimate. So I'm going to go with a 2-1 home victory for Wednesday. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised to see this one end level either, because I did rate QPR on the opening day, but I'm going to go with 2-1 Wednesday, whereas FIFA is back in an away victory, saying 2-0 QPR. Then to the evening kickoff on Saturday, we have the game between Middlesbrough and Sheffield United. So one game that I'm really looking forward to actually watching this one, because Middlesbrough not getting off to the best start to the season. They had their game against Wolves away, which they went ahead and lost by 1-0. They created chances in that game, but they just couldn't seem to stick them in the back of the net. That could be a different scenario in this one. I feel like Sheffield United, they'll make themselves hard to break down in this one, I feel like, and it's going to be interesting to see, because of course with Sheffield United absolutely romping League One last season, coming up against Middlesbrough, who are a lot of people's favourites to win the league, this could actually be a very lively affair. But in terms of a scoreline, I am going to back Middlesbrough to bounce back from that opening day defeat with a 2-0 victory over Sheffield United. I feel like they may have a bit too much for them in this one, and FIFA's actually going to agree with me. And then for our last fixture to go ahead and talk over, we have the game taking place on Sunday between Norwich and Sunderland. Now, in my opinion, Sunderland are a bit unfortunate in this one actually, because they're actually playing tonight on Thursday night in the Cup. I don't know why, that just makes no sense to me, but in my opinion, Norwich have then got a massive advantage over Sunderland, because they've had 2 more days to rest and prepare for this game. So for that reason, I think Norwich may do it in this one. It's a little bit harsh on Sunderland really. I don't know why they are playing on Thursday. It seems a bit stupid to me, playing on Thursday in the Cup. But in terms of how I thought Norwich played at Fulham, I was largely impressed by them really, and if they can, like I said, finish a few more of their chances like Marley Watkins had and other players like that, I think Norwich should do this one. Sunderland, I was quite impressed with how Sunderland played against Derby, but in terms of comparing Norwich and Derby, I think Norwich will be a bit more of a force this season, especially going forward. So for that reason, I'm going to go with a 2-0 home victory for Norwich, and FIFA's going to say it'll be a 0-0 draw. So there you guys have it. That will wrap it up for this episode of my Week 2 Championship score predictions. So do you agree with my score predictions, and what are your score predictions? Let me know about them in the comments down below. But apart from that guys, that will now wrap it up for this video. So thank you so much for watching. So if you have enjoyed the video, make sure you do leave a like. It is always massively appreciated. As well as that, make sure you subscribe for regular Championship content. As well as that, thank you so much for 6,000 subscribers. But apart from that guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.